name is Sue Scheidt-Giles, and I'm an adult services librarian here at Bexley Public Library. I want to welcome you today to our program, What's New in Nutrition with Jenny Lobb. We're going to learn key recommendations from the 2020 to 2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, and Jenny will also share how we can use these dietary guidelines to make simple shifts in our diet to improve our nutrition. Jenny is a family and consumer sciences educator for OSU Extension in Franklin County. She holds a bachelor's degree in human nutrition and a master's in public health, both from OSU. She's also a registered and licensed dietitian in the state of Ohio. And she specializes in food, nutrition, and wellness. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny now, and I'm sure we're going to have a very informative and fun discussion. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Sue, and thanks for pulling together the cookbook collection too. I think it's always fun to browse a new cookbook, at least in my opinion. And actually, it's a great tie-in because March is National Nutrition Month. If you are not familiar with that, every March, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics celebrates National Nutrition Month, and they pick a theme each year. And this year's theme is Celebrate a World of Flavors, which is also a really fun theme. I think sometimes we get this idea in our heads that healthy eating is boring or bland, and it doesn't have to be that way. So this theme kind of encourages us to try new flavors, new ingredients, or maybe revisit a favorite family or cultural recipe. So that will be my action step I'll encourage you to take today, even before we start talking about the dietary guidelines, is to this month try or revisit a new recipe for National Nutrition Month. But we are going to talk about the dietary guidelines. If you're not familiar with them, they are released every 5 years by the USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's guidelines that tell us how to eat to promote health and prevent disease. So these are, kind of general guidance for the average person to promote health. If you have a condition like something such as heart disease or diabetes, you may need more specific guidance that goes beyond these general guidelines. So what we're talking about today is the general guidance, and they are foundational, designed for everybody, but you may have more unique needs. So please do keep that in mind. And if you do have more specific questions or more unique needs, that's a great opportunity to find a dietitian you could work with to get your questions answered or get maybe a more specific meal plan that's tailored to your needs. The theme of this edition of the guidelines is called Make Every Bite Count. And one unique thing about this edition is that for the first time ever, they are organized by stage of life. So the theme is Make Every Bite Count from childhood through adulthood. And so, the general overarching guidelines apply to everyone, but within the document, they do have special, chapters, if you will, with some more specific guidance based on life stage. And I am, as we begin, going to pull up the actual website. So I'll be summarizing these today, giving you the high points, but know that they are available online if you do want to access or explore them yourself at dietaryguidelines.gov. And there's lots of resources in addition to the opportunity to download the actual document. Lots of helpful resources on here. And we're going to watch this brief overview video before I go any farther. So that video started out with the roadmap. There are 4 key recommendations within this edition of the Dietary Guidelines. And I do have paper copies of this image that I printed and brought with me. So if you want to grab one from the back for your reference, those are available to you. The first guideline is to follow a healthy diet pattern at every stage of life. You know, we all need to eat basically the same nutrients regardless of our age, though the portions do differ. A young child is not going to need as much of most nutrients as an adult would. So we all do need, you know, more or less the same nutrients, but the amounts differ throughout life. So following a healthy dietary pattern at every life stage is the first key. Then the second is to customize and enjoy your nutritious food and beverage choices. And this gets at that theme of this year's National Nutrition Month of celebrating a world of flavors. So, you know, there are some underlying you know, components of what makes up a healthy diet, but there's a lot of room for customization within that. So you can customize your plate to reflect your personal preferences, your cultural traditions, and even your budgetary constraints or considerations. The third recommendation is to focus on meeting your needs, your nutrition needs, with nutrient-dense foods and beverages. Nutrient-dense means that something has a lot of nutrients relative to the calories it contains, and we'll come back to that. And then the fourth recommendation is to limit foods and beverages that are higher in added sugars, saturated fat, and sodium, and to limit alcoholic beverages. And again, all of these recommendations are designed to promote health and prevent disease. So focus on getting those nutrient-dense foods and limiting the things that our bodies don't need, like the added sugar, saturated fat, sodium, and alcoholic beverages. Hopefully my plate at least looks familiar. You've seen it before. It's been around for over 10 years now. And my plate and the guidelines go hand in hand. So the guidelines are a very detailed document on what to eat for optimal health. My plate is a simple icon that tells us how to use those guidelines, how to eat for optimal health. So we want to focus on the food groups included in my plate, striving to make half our plate fruits and vegetables, consuming grains with an emphasis on whole grain, protein with an emphasis on lean protein, and then low fat or fat-free dairy or dairy alternatives that provide us with calcium and vitamin D. These are nutrient-dense foods. So when those guidelines use that term, nutrient-dense, it's really getting at the food groups on my plate. These foods have a lot of nutrients relative to the calories that they provide. Whereas things that are not depicted here, things that you know, are sweets or they're fats, they are more energy dense. They have a lot of calories, but not a lot of nutrients. And it's important to use my plate and focus on meeting our nutrient needs through these food groups, because this image also came up in that video. It's estimated that we need to consume about 85% of our energy needs from those my plate food groups to meet our daily nutrient needs. So consuming about 85% of your daily calories from fruits, vegetables, grains, dairy, and protein will help you meet your daily energy needs and your nutrient needs. That leaves only about 15% for those discretionary foods or other uses like fats, sugars, and so forth. What happens if this ratio is off? What happens if you're consuming more than 15% of your calories from other foods? You're either going to overconsume and gain weight, or you may be not gaining weight, you may be getting enough energy, but not enough nutrients. You're going to have nutrient deficiencies. So when this ratio is off, and you're consuming more than, that 15% from your discretionary foods, you may be overnourished, consuming too many calories, or undernourished, where you're not getting enough nutrients. And we all have room to improve. So there were a few images in that video. I only pulled one of them out, but currently only about a quarter of Americans have diets that are high in fruits and vegetables. So the flip of that is what's listed here. About 3/4 of us, 75%, have diets that are low in fruits and vegetables. About 2/3 of us, 63%, are exceeding the recommended limit for added sugar. About 3/4, 77% of us, are exceeding the limit for saturated fat. And then about 90% of us are exceeding the recommendation for sodium. So we'll look at each of those things: added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium, and where they come from and how to limit them. But I will say again that we all have room for improvement here. There was an image that comes directly from the guidelines that was in that introductory video. I did not include it in my slide set, but it looked more like a report card. There were different people at different life stages, and they all had scores. And the bookends had the highest score, which means that young children and older adults tend to have the most healthy diets, but even still, they only score in the 60 to 70 percentile on the healthy eating index. And if you think of that like a report card, a C or a D is just not cutting it. So we all have room to improve in this regard. So looking first at sodium, the recommendation is no more than a teaspoon a day, 2,300 milligrams for individuals 50 and younger. If you are not at higher risk for heart disease. For individuals over 50, or for those who are at higher risk for heart disease, including African Americans and those who have a condition like high blood pressure, diabetes, the recommendation is no more than 1,500 milligrams a day. And that is, again, to help prevent heart disease. There's a direct connection between our sodium consumption and heart disease and high blood pressure. Most of the sodium that we consume, though, is not coming from the salt shaker. Where do you think it comes from? Yeah, you can just yell, toss out some ideas. Processed foods. Yeah, for the most part, it is processed and packaged items and restaurant or takeout food as well, including things like pizza, frozen pizza, takeout pizza, frozen chicken, takeout chicken, soups, like your canned soups and canned pastas, snack foods like pretzels and chips, breads and rolls are made with salt. It may not seem like a lot, but the quantity we eat makes that add up. Our cold cuts, our lunch meats, and then things like sandwiches, cheese, and meat dishes, those are the top sources of sodium in our diet. So if you're looking to try to reduce the amount of sodium you're consuming, the best thing you can do is try to reduce the amount of the processed and packaged items you're consuming. So maybe instead of buying a can of soup, you could look for a reduced sodium variety, or maybe make your own. And making your own would really be the better choice. Oftentimes, even if something says reduced, the question you want to ask is reduced from what? It may not necessarily mean low, even if it is reduced in sodium. If you are buying packaged items, you can use the nutrition fact label as a tool to help you determine whether something is high or low in a nutrient. A quick guide, a rule of thumb, is to use that percent daily value in the right-hand column. And a general rule of thumb is that if it's 20% or more, it's considered high in that nutrient. And if it's 5% or less, it's considered low. So for sodium, you would want to look for something that is lower in sodium. And sometimes in the example I used of the canned soup, sometimes that might be 40, 50%. So trying to look for something that is lower in sodium can be a strategy. If you're looking for canned vegetables or beans, you can look for your low sodium varieties. And even rinsing those off before you use them can be a way to get rid of some of that sodium. You can also use the nutrition fact label to help you pick healthier fats. So if you recall, the second thing that the guidelines recommend we limit is saturated fat. And there are different types of fats. We do need some fat in our diet. Fat helps with different bodily functions, hormone function, for example. It helps to insulate our organs. So we do need some fat, but the type and the amount of fat does make a difference. So anytime you can choose unsaturated over saturated, you're making a better choice. And again, you can use that nutrition fact label to look at the total fat content and the type of fat in some foods if you're not sure. But a general rule of thumb for this is that, saturated fats come from animal products, from dairy and meat, and they tend to be solid at room temperature. And so the same is true when you think about when they are digested and processed within our bodies. They're solid at room temperature. They have the tendency to solidify and clog our arteries if they're over consumed, whereas our unsaturated fats come from plant-based sources like oils, canola oil, olive oil. They come from nuts and seeds, avocado, fish. They tend to be liquid at room temperature. And so they flow more freely through our bodies. So anytime you can choose an unsaturated fat over a saturated fat, you're working toward that recommendation. And then the other thing that it's recommended we limit is added sugar. And again, you can use your nutrition fact label as a tool if you aren't sure about the added sugar. There is a line now. This hasn't always been the case, but on the nutrition fact label, there is a line specifically for added sugar. And this is sugar that's been added to a product. It's not naturally occurring. So something like orange juice, if it's 100% juice, it would have 0 grams of added sugar, even though it might be high in sugar from the orange. Whereas something like a fruit punch would be water with sugar added to it. It would be very high in added sugar. So the American Heart Association recommends limiting our added sugar to no more than 9 teaspoons, which is 36 grams a day for men, and 6 teaspoons or 25 grams a day for women. Those are just, general guidelines. You can, kind of do the math if you want something more individualized, but I like this because it's more, kind of clear cut and easy to remember. So beverages tend to be the biggest culprit of added sugar in our diet, but sugar can be hidden or added to many food items. Yogurt's another example of something that you might want to check if you like flavored yogurts. Sometimes there's just as much sugar in a cup of flavored yogurt as there might be in a candy bar. So a better choice there could be to use plain yogurt and sweeten it with fruit versus buying the flavored yogurt. So wrapping this all together, what we're encouraging you to do as we look at these guidelines is to shift from, make some healthy shifts or swaps in your diet. Move from less healthy foods or ingredients to more healthy foods. And this could be, trying to add more of those nutrient-dense foods, trying to add more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains, moving from white bread to whole grain bread, white rice to brown rice, moving from whole milk to low-fat milk. It could be moving away from something that's high in added sugar, sodium or saturated fat, those things we're trying to limit. So moving from soda to water, infused water, seltzer water is an example. There's another example. This one has a lot of little examples embedded in it. This image comes from the Dietary Guidelines, and it's an example of a made-over burrito bowl. So the burrito bowl on the left is a more typical, what they call a typical burrito bowl, and the one on the right is the made-over version. So the one on the left has 1.5 cups of white rice. The one on the right has brown rice. So they've made a shift from the white rice to the brown rice. And it has romaine lettuce and it has grilled vegetables. So they've added some of those more nutrient-dense foods by adding the vegetables there, which also adds color and flavor. So that's one shift. The one on the left has black beans, and the one on the right has reduced sodium black beans. So there's a shift to try to reduce the sodium. The one on the left has chicken cooked with sauce, where the one on the right has chicken with a spice rub. So there's a shift from the saturated fat, maybe even the sodium, to something that is flavored with spices. So getting rid of some of the saturated fat and sodium from that sauce. And the one on the right has sliced avocado and fresh salsa. So again, adding more fruits and vegetables, more color there. Instead of the sour cream, so getting rid of some of the saturated fat from sour cream. And the beverages may look the same, but they made a shift from a sweet tea to an unsweet tea. So lots of little shifts within this one example that collectively save about 400 calories. So the bowl on the left, the more traditional one, has 1,120 calories. The one on the right has 715 calories. So lots of little examples within this one example. But I'll pose the question to you, after hearing these guidelines and looking at a few examples, what are some shifts that you might make in your own diet or your own cooking to move from less nutritious to more nutritious options? Yeah, taking a walk to burn the stress rather than go into the cookies. Yeah, but yeah, having something from my plate versus the cookies is a shift there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that you're getting at, kind of a whole nother challenge, which is, food as comfort or food as a coping strategy. We eat for more reasons than just nutrition, for our physical nourishment. We turn to food for many reasons. So in both of the examples that have been shared so far, looking for alternate coping strategies could be a way to help in those instances. That's a great idea, investing in a rice cooker. And I love my Instant Pot. I can make a big batch of soup, even freeze half of it. And you can make something like a split pea soup in about an hour, like no soaking required. It's just amazing. You just put it in there and it's hands off. So sometimes it's using the right appliances or techniques that make this more doable for us. Well, we do need more than just the salad. We do need the protein and the grains and so forth. And you have to look at the full picture. Sometimes it's hard to go down, one rabbit hole, like trying to reduce the sodium and forget about some of the other components. So doing the best you can to look at that full picture and focus on meeting your basic food group needs while also reducing these things to the extent you can is the bottom line. I will advance to my formal slide with my contact information. I always share that if you do have questions later on and want to reach out, you are welcome to do so. I will also say that coming up in April, OSU Extension has a spring email wellness challenge. I'll come back to that slide in a moment. But if you're interested, you are welcome to sign up and receive 2 emails each week with different tips and ideas and encouragement just to help you stay healthy and well this spring. I brought paper flyers, put them on the back table. So if you're in the room and want to grab one, please do. But the link to register is go.osu.edu/LHLW Franklin, and it's completely free. The messages, if you sign up using this link, will be coming from me. So it's another avenue to follow up with questions or just sharing what you're learning and how you're progressing in your own wellness journey, whether it's nutrition related or related to another aspect of wellness. I do, yeah, I have a whole class on that actually. Maybe that would be a good one to do in the future, plant-based eating. But we do need protein, and there are ways to get protein that that don't involve meat. So thinking about some meals or recipes where you might be able to replace the meat with something like beans, whether they be canned or dry, or extending a meal that works really well with something like meatloaf or chili, where you can replace half the meat or double the recipe, but still only use the original quantity of meat and extend it by adding things like shredded carrot or zucchini or a can of beans or mushrooms. You get more vegetables that way, and you also kind of get double from that recipe without paying double for the meat. And then there are some more inexpensive animal sources of protein like eggs and tuna and so forth. That peanut butter is another one to help you get your protein without spending so much on the meat. Great questions as always. And I'm happy to stick around and continue to answer them. We have reached the formal end of the presentation.